The twin suns of Zarthinus cast long shadows across the Valley of Emperors. The greatest mystery in the known galaxy stood before them, silent, unmoved, impossible. The tomb of the first emperor rose like a crystalline mountain, piercing the clouds above. For 10,000 years, it had refused to open. Dr. Park Miho wiped sweat from his forehead and adjusted his scanning equipment one more time. His hands were shaking slightly, though he tried to hide it. As a human archaeologist who studied alien civilizations, he was used to being looked down upon. The Ctherii especially made him feel small. They were a species of tall reptilian beings who had built an empire across 12 star systems, while humans were still living in caves. Now they barely tolerated his presence at their most sacred place. A hissing voice came from behind him. The humans should not stand so close to the entrance. It was High Priestess Velsera. Her scales shimmered in the double sunlight, showing colors of disapproval. She was ancient even by Ctherii standards. The ceremonial robes she wore were covered with symbols older than most civilizations in the galaxy. This is not a place for newcomers like your kind. Ambassador Talvin stepped forward quickly. He was younger than most Ctherii leaders and believed in working with other species. The Galactic Council gave permission for this expedition, Your Holiness. All member species have the right to study the tomb. To study, perhaps, but not to stand here during our sacred ceremony. Captain Li Jaiwan moved to stand beside Miho. She commanded the human research ship in orbit above the planet. Her military background made even the Ctherii guards show her respect. We are here to observe and help if we can. Dr. Park knows more about ancient locks than anyone in the fleet. Miho tried not to smile. Jaiwan always defended him, even when he dragged her into another impossible mystery. They had worked together for 5 years, and she had learned that his strange hunches about ancient ruins were usually correct. The plaza in front of the tomb held more than 300 beings. There were Ctherii priests in flowing robes, scientists from a dozen different species, diplomatic observers taking notes, and news drones flying overhead broadcasting to billions of viewers across the galaxy. The sealed entrance of the tomb loomed above them all. Strange writing covered the massive doors, and the symbols seemed to move and shift in the light. A Ctherii translator spoke loudly so everyone could hear. The words say, "Only blood of the royal line shall break the seal. Only those who carry the ancient flame in their veins may pass. All others shall find only stone and silence." For 10,000 years, the Ctherii had tried everything. They brought genetic samples from every living royal descendant. They performed blood rituals that had been passed down through generations. They even tried to clone the first emperor himself from old DNA fragments. Nothing worked. The door stayed sealed. The mechanism remained a mystery. Miho studied the inscription through his portable scanner. "The grammar is strange," he whispered to Jaiwan. "The word they translate as blood, it has 3 different meanings in ancient Ctherii. It can mean family lineage, yes, but it also means essence or expelled force. You think they got the translation wrong? I think they are reading it too literally when it might be a metaphor." The ceremony began. Velsera led a long line of royal descendants to the entrance. Each one placed their scaled hand on a panel in the stone. Each one spoke the ancient words of opening. Each one waited as nothing happened. The disappointment in the crowd was thick enough to feel. Another year, another failure. Miho moved closer, with his scanner active. The local plants were in full bloom around the plaza. Great towers of purple flowers released clouds of yellow pollen into the air. Beautiful. But his allergies were already starting to bother him. He had forgotten to take his medicine that morning. That was a mistake. "Dr. Park, please step back," Velsera commanded. "The ceremony is not finished." He nodded and moved away, but the tickle in his nose was getting worse. The pollen was everywhere. He could feel the familiar pressure building. The unstoppable urge was coming. No, not now, not during their sacred ceremony. He pressed a finger under his nose hard, trying desperately to stop it. Jaiwan noticed his struggle and moved to help him, but it was already too late. The sneeze exploded from him with tremendous force. The sound echoed across the entire plaza like a thunderclap. Achoo! The sound wave hit the tomb entrance directly. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the ancient mechanisms rumbled to life. Energy flowed across the sealed door like liquid starlight. Crystalline structures that had been dark and dead for 10,000 years suddenly blazed with inner fire. The massive stone doors began to grind open. Each door weighed thousands of tons, but they moved smoothly. The sound was like thunder rolling across mountains. Every Ctherii in the plaza dropped to their knees instantly. Gasps of shock rippled through the crowd like waves. News drones swarmed forward, trying to capture every moment of the impossible event unfolding before them. Miho stood frozen. His hand was still at his nose. He stared in complete disbelief at what he had just done. His sneeze, a simple, embarrassing human sneeze, had opened a door that had been sealed for longer than human civilization had existed. Velsera rose slowly to her feet. Her eyes were fixed on him with an expression caught between religious wonder and pure fury. What manner of sorcery is this? I sneezed, Miho said weakly. His voice sounded small and foolish in his own ears. I am sorry. I did not mean to. The doors continued opening wider. They revealed a passage that descended into darkness. Strips of glowing crystal lined the walls, providing dim light that stretched down into impossible depths. A breath of air came up from below. It smelled like ozone and secrets that had waited too long to be discovered. Ambassador Talvin was the first to find his voice. Record everything. Analyze everything. The tomb has opened after 10,000 years. The seal has been broken. By a human, Velsera whispered. In those 3 words was the sound of an entire worldview crumbling. The tomb that opens only for royal blood. Opened by a human sneeze. Jaiwa moved quickly to Miho's side. Her hand went to the weapon at her hip, ready to protect him from whatever would come next. I think we are going to need to report this immediately. Miho could only nod. He stared at the open tomb entrance, wondering what he had just unleashed upon the galaxy. The darkness below seemed to stare back at him, full of secrets and purpose. The doors finished opening with a final, deep boom that shook the ground beneath their feet. And somewhere in that darkness below, after 10,000 years of waiting, something ancient began to wake. The Ctherii High Council called an emergency meeting within hours of the tomb opening. Miho found himself standing in a circular chamber aboard the orbital station called Throne of Ancestors. The most powerful members of Ctherii society surrounded him in a circle. He had never felt so small and vulnerable in his entire life. Explain yourself, human. War. Master Drek stepped forward. He was the largest Ctherii Miho had ever seen. His scales were covered with scars from countless battles. His voice was deep and threatening. How did you bypass the sacred seal? Miho swallowed hard. His mouth felt dry. I did not bypass anything, War Master. I sneezed. It was an allergic reaction to the pollen from your planet's flowers. Lies! A priest from a conservative faction slammed his ceremonial staff against the metal floor. The sound rang through the chamber. This is human trickery. Deception. They have stolen our birthright. The humans had no way to know how the lock worked, Ambassador Talvin said firmly. He stood up to defend Miho. All their activities have been monitored constantly. Dr. Park's action was completely unintentional. Yet the tomb opened, Velsera said quietly. Her soft voice somehow carried more weight than any shouting. For 10,000 years, the blood of our royal families could not break the seal. Then a human exhales forcefully, and the doors open immediately. What does this mean for us? Scientific teams had already begun studying the tomb's entrance. Dr. Choi Hyojin, the lead human engineer, entered the council chamber. She projected her findings into the air as holograms that everyone could see. Her analysis would shock them all. The locking mechanism is not genetic, Hyojin explained carefully. She highlighted different parts of the hologram as she spoke. Our scans show it responds to a specific type of aerosol projection. It needs a forceful, explosive breath that includes moisture particles, carbon dioxide, and biological compounds. These must be delivered at high velocity in a cone-shaped pattern. You are describing a sneeze, Jaiwan said from where she stood beside Miho. Exactly correct. The mechanism was never designed to recognize DNA or bloodline. It was built to respond to a specific physical action that the Ctheriai species apparently does not have. Velsera's scales rippled with visible agitation. The colors shifted in waves across her body. The Ctheriai do not sneeze? Your respiratory system works differently than ours. Hygiene continued. She brought up biological comparison charts. When irritants enter your nostrils, you filter them out or expel them with controlled breathing. Only a few species in the galaxy have developed the involuntary sneeze reflex. Humans have the most forceful version of all known species. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Accusations flew back and forth. Some claimed the human analysis must be false. Others said the first emperor had been misunderstood for thousands of years. Still others insisted this proved humanity had been chosen for an important purpose. Miho watched it all with growing anxiety. He had not asked for any of this. He just wanted to study an ancient mystery. He never wanted to become the center of a cultural crisis that threatened to tear apart Ctheriai society. "There is more," Hygiene said loudly. The chamber fell silent. Initial drone scans of the tomb's interior have detected something impossible. The holographic display changed. It now showed readings from inside the sealed structure. Miho leaned forward. His archaeological instincts pushed aside his discomfort. "These are DNA traces," Hygiene continued. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly. "Specifically human DNA. We found it in multiple locations throughout the tomb. The dating shows it is 10,000 years old." "That is impossible," Miho said immediately. Humans had not even developed writing 10,000 years ago. We were nowhere near this star system. We did not even know aliens existed. Yet the evidence is absolutely clear. Either our dating methods are completely wrong, which is unlikely, or the first emperor visited Earth, Talvin said slowly. Understanding dawned on his face. Before humans reached the stars. Before we even knew your species existed. The implications hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. The chamber was completely silent. War Master Drex stood up. His massive form was intimidating. "I move that the tomb be sealed again immediately. This human contamination must be contained. The sacred seal should never have been broken by these newcomers." "Sealed." Jaiwen's hand moved toward her weapon. "That seems very premature, War Master. Are you threatening this council, human soldier?" "I am suggesting that closing a 10,000-year-old mystery because you do not like the answer is short-sighted and foolish." Velsera raised her hand for silence. Everyone stopped talking immediately. "The tomb is open. We cannot change this fact. What we can do is learn why. Why would the first emperor create a seal that only humans could trigger? Why would he visit Earth when humans were primitive? What did he see in humanity that made him make such a choice?" "Only one way to find out," Miho said. His voice was quiet but clear. "We go inside the tomb." "Absolutely not," Drex growled. His scales showed colors of anger. "Humans have no place in the tomb of our greatest emperor." "With respect, War Master," Ambassador Talvin said. "If the emperor designed the seal to respond specifically to humans, then perhaps humans are exactly who should go inside." The debate continued for hours. Voices were raised. Arguments became heated. Finally, a compromise was reached. An expedition team would descend into the tomb. Both Ctheriai and humans would go together. Miho would go as the human who opened the seal. Jaiwen would go as military protection. Velsera would go as spiritual guardian. Talvin would go as diplomatic observer. And War Master Drex would go to make sure no human committed any acts of disrespect. As the council session ended, Miho caught up with Hygiene in the corridor outside. "You said there was human DNA in the tomb. How much? Where exactly?" She looked around carefully to make sure no one else could hear. "Everywhere, Miho. Not just small traces. We found full genetic profiles. Hair samples. Skin cells. Even what appears to be deliberately preserved blood samples. Someone very human spent significant time in that tomb. And either our dating methods are all completely wrong, or the first emperor collected samples from ancient humans on Earth 10,000 years ago, which raises the most important question. Why would he do that? Miho stared out the window at the tomb far below on the planet's surface. Its crystalline structure glowed in the double sunlight. I think we are about to find out the answer. The expedition would begin at dawn. Miho spent the night reviewing everything known about the first emperor. He had been a scholar, a warrior, a scientist, and a ruler all in one. A being who united the Therii worlds and built an empire that lasted for thousands of years. A being who, apparently, had taken a very special interest in primitive humans on a distant planet called Earth. As Miho finally fell asleep, one thought kept circling through his mind. The inscription had not said royal blood of the Therii. It just said royal blood. What if the first emperor had been looking for a completely different kind of royalty? The expedition team gathered at the tomb's entrance as dawn broke across Zarthinus. Miho checked his equipment for the third time. It was a nervous habit that Jaiwin had learned to tolerate over the years. "Relax," she said while adjusting the straps on her tactical gear. "What is the worst that could happen? Ancient death traps? Collapsing structures? Curses that kill us all? You are not helping me feel better. I am never helping. That is why you like having me around." Velsera approached them with a group of priests following behind her. They chanted prayers and blessings for the expedition. Her ceremonial robes had been replaced with practical climbing gear, but she still carried her staff of office. It was a crystalline rod that hummed with faint energy. "The tomb has stood for 10,000 years, she said formally. "We enter with respect, with caution, and with purpose. The first emperor's wisdom guided our people through dark times. Whatever we find inside must be treated with the reverence it deserves." War Master Drex growled his agreement, though his scales showed colors of deep suspicion. And if the human triggers another mechanism, if his presence causes damage to what lies below, then we deal with it, Ambassador Talvin said smoothly, "as we have dealt with every challenge our people have faced." Together, the team numbered 12 in total. 4 were humans, 6 were Therii, and 2 were scientific observers from neutral species. They activated their lights, checked their communication devices, and began their descent into the unknown. The passageway sloped downward at a steady angle. The walls were covered with the same glowing crystal that provided dim, eternal light. The air was cool and dry, perfectly preserved by whatever technology maintained the structure after all these centuries. "These crystals," Miho said while running a scanner along the wall, "they are not just decoration. They are recording devices." Hyojin moved beside him. Her own equipment confirmed his readings. "You are right. They are storing massive amounts of data. Visual information, audio recordings, probably much more. This entire passage is a library." As if responding to their discovery, the crystals suddenly flickered. Then, without warning, they blazed with brilliant light. A hologram materialized in the corridor before them. It showed a Therii in ancient royal armor. He was taller than any living member of their species. His scales shimmered with colors that seemed to shift through dimensions. His eyes held the weight of centuries of wisdom. "The first emperor," Velsera whispered. She dropped to one knee immediately. The hologram did not move. It remained frozen, waiting for something. "Maybe it needs activation," Hyojin suggested. She reached her hand toward it. "No." Drex snapped quickly. "Let the human do it." He opened the tomb. "Let him face what comes next." Miho stepped forward. His heart was pounding hard in his chest. He had spent his career studying dead civilizations and ancient ruins. Now he was face to face with a recording of history's greatest ruler. He reached out and touched the hologram. It came to life instantly. The Emperor's voice filled the corridor. He spoke in ancient Therii. Velsera translated simultaneously, her voice shaking with emotion. "If you hear these words, the seal has opened. The one who carries the gift has arrived. I am First Emperor Velkareth, and I have waited long for this moment." The hologram began to walk down the corridor. It gestured for them to follow. As they moved deeper, more holograms activated around them. They showed scenes from the Emperor's reign. There were battles against impossible enemies, scientific discoveries that reshaped understanding of reality, diplomatic achievements that united warring worlds. The Emperor had been more than just a ruler. He had been a visionary who changed everything. But the deeper they went, the more the recordings changed. They began to show the Emperor studying other species, dozens of them from across the galaxy. He had been searching for something specific. Then the holograms showed Earth. Miho stopped breathing. There, projected in perfect clarity, were primitive humans. They were building structures from mud and stone. They were painting on cave walls. They were fighting, laughing, dying, and living. And watching them all, taking samples and making notes, was the first Emperor himself. He visited Earth, Jaiwin said in disbelief. 10,000 years ago. He was actually there. The hologram Emperor turned to face them directly. It was as if he could see across the millennia to this exact moment. I studied 53 species. The translation continued. Each had potential. Each had strengths. But only one species had the quality I sought. Only one combined chaos with purpose, logic with intuition, individual creativity with collective cooperation. Only one had evolved the explosive reflex, the involuntary expression of biological rejection that demonstrates perfect natural design. He is talking about sneezing, Hyojin said incredulously. He is talking about more than that, Miho replied. Understanding began to dawn on him. He is talking about what sneezing represents. An uncontrollable, powerful response to irritation. A perfect metaphor for human nature. The Emperor's message continued. The Ctherii became great through order and structure. But structure can become rigidity. Order can become stagnation. I foresaw a time when my people would need something they could never create themselves. Controlled chaos. Creative destruction. The ability to break rules not from ignorance but from innovation. They reached a vast chamber. The ceiling soared hundreds of meters above them. The walls were covered in complex machinery that still hummed with power after 10 millennia. This is not just a tomb, Talvin said with awe in his voice. It is a research facility. It is more than that, Velsera added. She pointed to inscriptions that covered every surface. These are warnings, predictions. The Emperor foresaw something terrible coming. Miho moved to the nearest wall. His translator worked to process the ancient text. As the words became clear, cold dread settled deep in his stomach. The cycle returns, he read aloud. Every 10,000 years, they come from beyond. They calculate. They consume. They adapt to all logic, all strategy, all patterns. Only that which cannot be calculated can defeat them. Only chaos bound by purpose. Only humanity. The Void-born, Velsera whispered. Her voice was filled with ancient fear. The old texts speak of them, demons from beyond reality, who nearly destroyed the Ctherii in a time of legends. And according to these markers, Hyojin said while studying her scanner, they are due to return, very soon. War Master Drex's scales displayed colors of both rage and fear. The Emperor knew. He knew they would return. And he left what? A message? A warning? What good does that do us now? Maybe more than a warning, Jaiwin said. She had found a sealed doorway at the far end of the chamber. Symbols marked it that made her combat instincts flare with alarm. This looks like an armory. The door was sealed with the same mechanism as the tomb's main entrance. Everyone looked at Miho. You have got to be kidding me, he said. The first Emperor designed this for humans, Talvin said. Whatever is beyond that door, he meant for your species to find it. Miho approached the door slowly. Unlike the tomb's entrance, this one had clear instructions etched beside it. For the ones who sneeze, the key to chaos. He felt ridiculous and awed at the same time. He felt the weight of 10,000 years pressing down on him. He sneezed directly on the door. It opened smoothly. Beyond lay weapons and technology unlike anything in the known galaxy. And at the center of it all, in a chamber of perfect preservation, stood a stasis pod with someone inside. Velsera approached slowly, both reverent and terrified. She read the inscription on the pod's surface. Her voice broke as she spoke. I sleep until they arrive. I sleep until the ones who sneeze can stand beside me. Wake me when the time comes. I am First Emperor Velkareth. He is alive. Miho breathed. After 10,000 years, he is still alive. War Master Drex moved forward. His hand reached toward the pod's controls. The pod activated. The Emperor's eyes opened, and they focused directly on Miho. The first Emperor rose from his stasis pod with the grace of someone who had merely taken a short nap rather than slept for 10,000 years. His scales, which had seemed dull in the hologram recordings, now shimmered with vibrant colors that shifted with each breath he took. He was smaller than his holographic image had suggested, but the presence he commanded filled the entire vast chamber. He spoke, and though the language was ancient, their translation devices caught the meaning clearly. The ones who sneeze have arrived. Good. We have little time. Velsera prostrated herself immediately on the floor. Her voice was thick with emotion. First Emperor, blessed ancestor, we are unworthy to stand in your presence. I am High Priestess Velsera, guardian of your teachings. Yes, yes, the Emperor interrupted, waving a clawed hand dismissively. You are very pious. I am sure you have maintained the temples beautifully. But piety will not save you from what is coming. He stepped down from the pod platform. His movements were fluid despite the impossibly long sleep. His eyes scanned each member of the expedition team, lingering longest on the humans. You, he said, pointing directly at Miho. You opened the seal. You sneezed on my door. Yes, Your Majesty. I am Dr. Park Miho. I am sorry if I... Sorry. The Emperor's scales rippled with colors that might have been amusement. Child, you have done exactly what I needed you to do. Your species reached the stars. You found my tomb. You triggered my mechanisms. Everything is proceeding as I calculated. He paused and tilted his head. Well, mostly. I had hoped humanity would arrive with more advanced weapons technology, but we work with what we have. Jaiwin stepped forward. Her military bearing was evident in every movement. Your Majesty, what exactly did you calculate? The holograms mentioned something called the Voidborn. The Emperor's amusement vanished instantly. It was replaced by an expression of grim determination. Yes, the Voidborn. The reason I built this tomb. The reason I studied your species when you were barely out of your caves. The reason I have waited 10,000 years in frozen sleep. He gestured with his hand, and the entire chamber transformed around them. Holographic displays erupted from every surface. They showed calculations, star charts, and dimensional maps that hurt to look at directly. The Voidborn exists in the spaces between realities, the Emperor explained. His voice took on the tone of a teacher giving a lecture. They are beings of pure mathematics. They perceive the universe as a series of calculable probabilities. When they enter our dimension, they analyze, predict, and consume everything. They have destroyed hundreds of civilizations across multiple galaxies. How did you defeat them before? Talvin asked carefully. We barely survived. The Ctherii of my time were still chaotic enough, creative enough, to introduce variables into their calculations. We fought them for 700 years. Millions died on both sides. But we won, and I learned something crucial during that war. The Voidborn cannot process true randomness. They can calculate probability, but not genuine chaos. They can predict patterns, but not spontaneity. Ambassador Talvin's scales showed colors of understanding mixed with dread, and we have become too ordered, too structured. 10,000 years of building and maintaining an empire has made us predictable. Exactly correct, the Emperor said with approval, which is why I needed humanity. He turned to face Miho and the other humans directly. Your species is unique in the galaxy. You combine logic with intuition in ways no other species does. You follow patterns but break them when necessary. You create order, then deliberately introduce chaos to improve it. You are predictable enough to work with, but unpredictable enough to be incomprehensible to pure mathematical beings. You're saying we are chaos agents. Hyojin said slowly, processing this information. I am saying you are the perfect chaos agents. Your sneeze reflex is the perfect metaphor for your nature. It is a powerful, involuntary response to irritation that cannot be suppressed by will alone. You cannot fully control it, but you have learned to live with it. Even use it to your advantage. That is what the Voidborn cannot calculate or understand. War Master Drex's scales showed colors of insulted pride. You're suggesting the Ctherii cannot fight our own battles? That we need these newcomers to protect us? I am not suggesting anything, War Master. I am telling you facts. The Void-born return in cycles. Based on the time markers in this facility, they will arrive in this system in approximately 3 months. If you face them alone with your current rigid thinking, you will lose. If you face them with humanity as allies, you have a real chance of victory. The chamber fell into heavy silence. The weight of the Emperor's words settled on everyone like a physical force pressing down. Velsera spoke quietly. The ancient prophecies spoke of a great trial. We thought they were metaphorical. Spiritual tests of faith and devotion. My people turned everything into metaphor and spirituality after I left, the Emperor said, not unkindly. It is what happens when the wise become too comfortable with wisdom. They forget that sometimes a door is just a door, and sometimes a threat is simply a threat that must be faced. What do we do? Jaiwin asked. The soldier in her was already thinking tactically. 3 months is not much time to prepare for an interdimensional invasion. No, it is not, which is why I prepared for you thousands of years in advance. The Emperor gestured toward the armory they had glimpsed before waking him. These weapons are designed to be wielded by humans and Ctherii together. The ships require mixed crews. The strategies I have developed need both order and chaos working in harmony to succeed. He began walking toward the armory, and everyone followed instinctively. As they walked, he explained his vision. The Ctherii will provide structure, coordination, and tactical discipline. Humanity will provide unpredictability, innovation, and adaptive chaos. Together, you will create something the Void-born have never encountered in all their dimensional travels. Organized chaos. Miho found himself walking beside the ancient emperor. Your Majesty, why go to such elaborate lengths? Why not just build an army? Why make it so only humans could open the tomb? The emperor glanced at him. For a moment, Miho saw infinite weariness in those ancient eyes. Because, Dr. Park, I knew my people. I knew they would become rigid, traditional, and hierarchical over time. If I had left simple instructions saying work with humans when they arrive, they would have found ways to dismiss it, reinterpret it, or ignore it completely. But if I made it so only humans could access the knowledge and weapons, if I made humanity essential to the very process of discovery, then my people would have no choice but to accept your importance. That is remarkably manipulative. I prefer to think of it as remarkably practical. They reached the armory proper. Weapons lined the walls. Energy weapons pulsed with irregular rhythms. Blades shifted form based on the wielder's intent. Armor adapted to both Ctherii and human physiology automatically. News of the first Emperor's awakening spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The ancient ruler appeared via holographic transmission before Ctherii High Council, the Galactic Assembly, and every major government. He delivered his warning with the authority of someone who had already saved civilization once before. The Void-born were coming, faster than anticipated, more prepared than before. And this time, the Ctherii could not face them alone. The next 72 hours transformed everything. Miho stood in the newly established Joint Command Center, a massive facility that had been constructed in the tomb's upper chambers using the Emperor's ancient technology. The walls displayed tactical information from across the entire system. Ship positions, defensive installations, and most terrifying of all, the growing tear in space where the Void-born would soon emerge. Captain Kim Seo, the human fleet commander, studied the displays with a critical eye. She was younger than Mio had expected for someone commanding humanity's military forces, but her reputation for unconventional tactics had made her the obvious choice. These projections are absolutely terrifying, she said flatly. The Void-born outnumber us 50-1, and that is just the initial wave. Numbers do not matter to them, the first Emperor explained. He had taken to wearing a mixture of ancient armor and modern tactical gear, creating an appearance that was simultaneously strange and perfectly appropriate. They calculate victory probabilities before engaging. If the mathematics say they will win, they commit their forces. If the numbers suggest defeat, they withdraw and recalculate their approach. So we need to make them unable to calculate, Jaiwin said. She had been promoted to Joint Tactical Coordinator, responsible for integrating human and Ctherii combat doctrines into something that could actually work. We need to be unpredictable enough that their probability matrices collapse completely. Exactly correct. War, Master Drex entered the command center. His scales showed colors of grudging respect. Over the past weeks, he had trained alongside human Marines and had been forced to admit that their chaotic tactics had genuine merit. The conservative factions are still protesting in the streets, he reported. They claim we are abandoning 10,000 years of tradition. We are honoring 10,000 years of survival, Velsera countered firmly. She had become one of the Alliance's strongest advocates, using her spiritual authority to bridge the gap between tradition and necessity. The first Emperor himself stands before us. His wisdom created those traditions in the first place. If he says we must change to survive, then change is the truest form of respect for our past. Hyojin rushed into the command center. Her tablet displayed new calculations. I have figured out how the weapons work. They use what I am calling chaos resonance technology. The more unpredictable the wielder's thoughts, the more powerful the weapon becomes. But it needs Ctheriai discipline to focus that chaos into something useful rather than just destructive. Training exercises had been running constantly for weeks. Human soldiers and Ctheriai warriors worked together, learning each other's strengths and weaknesses. At first, it had been a disaster. The Ctheriai found human tactics reckless and dangerous. The humans found Ctheriai methods too rigid and slow. But gradually, something remarkable began to happen. A Ctheriai squad leader named Kethran learned to incorporate human-style improvisation into his tactical planning. A human marine named Private Han Dasom learned to value Ctheriai discipline and coordination. Together, they created something new, something the galaxy had never seen before: organized chaos. The simulations showed it working. When Ctheriai forces provided structure and coordination, while human units introduced unpredictable variables, the Voidborn predictive algorithms failed catastrophically. They could not calculate responses to an enemy that was simultaneously orderly and chaotic. The key is timing, Captain Kim Seo explained during a strategy meeting. We let the Voidborn analyze our formations. We let them think they understand our tactics. Then, at the critical moment, humans do something completely unexpected while Ctheriai forces maintain overall strategic coherence. Like sneezing during a sacred ceremony, Miho said with a slight smile. Exactly like that. The first Emperor watched these developments with satisfaction. You are learning faster than I had hoped. Perhaps there is more potential in this alliance than even I calculated. Ambassador Talvin had been working tirelessly on the diplomatic front. Not all Ctheriai accepted the alliance easily. Many saw it as a betrayal of their heritage. But slowly, the message was spreading. The first Emperor himself had chosen this path. To reject, it was to reject him. The day finally came when long-range sensors detected the first breach. The Voidborn had arrived early. Not 3 months. Not even 2. They had somehow calculated humanity's involvement and adapted their timeline accordingly. Alarms blared throughout the command center. Every screen showed the same terrifying image. A massive tear in the fabric of space itself, growing larger with each passing second. And through that tear, darkness poured into their reality. Not the darkness of empty space, but something deeper, something that consumed light itself. All forces to battle stations, Captain Kim Seo commanded. Her voice was calm despite the apocalyptic threat before them. Execute Operation Sneeze Protocol. Miho had laughed when they first named the battle plan. Now, as he watched the combined human and Ctheriai fleet move into position, he understood the genius of it. The fleet formed perfectly ordered Ctheriai battle formations. The Voidborn would analyze these patterns, calculate optimal attack vectors, and commit their forces accordingly. But hidden within those formations, human ships waited with instructions to execute random maneuvers at unpredictable intervals. The Voidborn emerged fully. They were not ships in any traditional sense. They were geometric impossibilities, shapes that hurt to perceive directly, entities that existed partially in dimensions human eyes could not process. They began their analysis. Mathematical patterns flowed across their surfaces as they calculated every possible outcome. The combined fleet held formation, steady, predictable, exactly what the Voidborn expected. Then Miho, standing in the command center with a strange sense of historical symmetry, felt his allergies flare up once more. The tomb's ancient dust had been stirred up by all the activity. He sneezed. It was not louder than any other sound in the bustling command center, but somehow everyone heard it, and everyone smiled. All human units, Captain Kim Seo said with a grin, execute random protocols. Now, human ships suddenly broke formation in seemingly chaotic patterns. Some spun, some retreated, some charged forward at impossible angles. Some fired weapons in directions that made no tactical sense. Some broadcast confusing cultural data. Music, poetry, jokes that made no mathematical sense whatsoever. The Voidborn's calculations collapsed. Their perfect mathematical predictions encountered variables that should not exist. Chaos that somehow worked. Randomness that achieved strategic goals. It was impossible. It could not be calculated. And in that moment of confusion, the Ctherii forces struck with perfect coordination and overwhelming discipline. The battle raged for hours. The Voidborn adapted, but every time they began to understand the patterns, humans introduced new chaos. Every time they tried to counter the chaos, Ctherii discipline punished their confusion. Finally, unable to establish stable probability matrices, unable to guarantee victory through calculation, the Voidborn withdrew. They retreated through their dimensional terror, which sealed behind them. The command center erupted in cheers. Humans and Ctherii embraced. Enemies who had been strangers weeks ago now celebrated together as brothers and sisters in arms. The first emperor smiled. It was an expression of pride and peace. You have done well. Better than I dared hope. The Voidborn will not return soon. They have learned that this galaxy contains something they cannot calculate or consume. He looked at Miho. Humanity. 3 months later, Miho stood in a classroom at the newly established Joint Academy on Zarthinus. Students from dozens of species filled the seats, learning from both Ctherii wisdom and human ingenuity. As he lectured about the importance of respecting ancient knowledge while remaining adaptable to change, someone in the back row sneezed loudly. Everyone laughed, including the Ctherii students. And that, Miho said with a warm smile, is what we call the human element. Sometimes the most profound changes in history come from the most unexpected places, even from something as simple and natural as a sneeze. Velsera, now serving as co-director of the Academy, added her own wisdom. The first emperor taught us that strength comes not from rigidity, but from the ability to adapt, not from tradition alone, but from the courage to embrace new ideas when survival demands it. War Master Drex, now training mixed combat units, stood at the back of the classroom. His scales showed colors of contentment. He had learned that true strength came from unity, not isolation. The galaxy had changed. 2 species, once strangers, were now inseparable allies. The tomb that opened only for royal blood had revealed its truth. Humanity carried their own kind of royalty. The royalty of chaos, creativity, and the indomitable spirit to never stop adapting. And somewhere in the spaces between dimensions, the Voidborn calculated and recalculated, trying desperately to understand the equation that would never make sense to beings of pure mathematics. How do you calculate a sneeze? The end.